So let's see. This talk is going to be kind of casual, candid. Not going to go too into details because details are boring. I don't want you guys to fall asleep and you're already eating. Dan, let me know. I'm good to go? Okay. Let's see. So to go over like everything that's going to be happening with these talks, let me make sure I'm talking into the mic a bit more. My talk's basically going to kick off the Game Developers Week. Most of these guys I've actually worked with, so you guys are in store for some awesome talks this week. So let's dive into some things. Oh, before we do, special thanks go to Dan, part of the IGDA Orange County, for helping with the camera work. Matthew is downstairs. He's also part of the VGDC, and also Edwin of the VGDC, and all the officers and everybody that's involved with it. Thanks for setting all this up. You guys are awesome. Okay, so let's get started. So you want to make video games, eh? I had to think of, I don't know, what images jumped out to me as to what it's like making video games. So not to get too deep into it, but I've been making games professionally for the last 15 years, and then before that, probably 5 years prior. I graduated from UCI in 2003 with a degree in computer science. That's where I met my original game developer team. But I'll go into the history of all that stuff. The first thing, actually, I'm going to turn the chair so it's easier for me to see the screen and talk to people. So, what I'm going to tell you today, and this is going to sound weird at first, but it's going to make sense, is how to listen to a talk. It should sound obvious. I mean, you guys go to lectures all the time, so you know what to look out for. But one thing about the game industry is that these talks actually are different than what you're used to. I'd say about 20% of the talks that you will encounter throughout your career in the video game industry, if you do survive, 20% of them are good, 80% are pretty much crap. So I'm going to teach you guys how to filter them out and what to look out for. And then the other thing, you want me to talk lower? Just a smidgen? I can decrease the volume on it too. This thing is like really fancy, this volume control. Is that better? Yes?
A little less.
How about now?
That's good.
Okay. I can also go micless. So I'm going to give you some war stories. As I mentioned, I graduated from UCI, and so I'm going to tell you about my journey through the industry, how it all started, and how I got to where I am today. And if we have time, I will go over some different paths you can use to get into the industry based on what your skill set is, what you're good at, what you're not so good at. There's a lot of ways to get in, but not everybody can use every path. And then we'll have a Q&A section. So in between all these parts, I'll open the floor up for a Q&A thing. Dan, do you know if Matt gave us the other wireless mic for people to ask questions?
Yes.
We don't need it right now. It's fine. I just want to know if it exists.
Yeah, it exists.
Okay, great. So, who am I? Well, in 2001, I started at Blizzard, working on a few games. And how that happened, it was my, I think, sophomore year at UCI. So I guess, yeah, 2001, that's a while ago. I'm old, if you can tell by the lack of hair. But actually, I lost most of my hair in my first few years of the industry because it's very stressful. So there was a job fair at UCI, and Blizzard was there. I was not the best student. I would say I was probably a solid C average. I did just enough to pass while maximizing the amount of time I had to play video games. I really carefully min-maxed it. But my friends, they were great at going to all these events, doing their homework and studying, so I hung around the smart kids, and that's kind of how I got by and got into some of these opportunities. And one of my friends, his name is Lloyd Toulouse. He was a tech director at EA. He also graduated from here with a degree in computer science. He was at the job fair, spoke to Blizzard, and got himself a job in QA, part-time, because he was also a sophomore. About a month after he gets in there, he says, okay, Blizzard is still hiring, and I could use a job. I mean, student loans were not as scary as they are today. But I mean, I wanted to get my foot in the door, and it was Blizzard, and they were actually right down the street. For those that don't know, Blizzard was on Theory for quite a while, and that's where they made WoW. So they were right down the road, so it was convenient, so that played into a lot of the things that I like. I'm incredibly lazy, I like things that are convenient, and I don't like putting in that much effort, so it was perfect. So I interviewed at Blizzard. It was it was a very weird interview because I'd never actually interviewed at a software company before. And I knew what QA was, but I figured, okay, I'm doing computer science stuff, I've written some apps, and I asked during the phone interview if they wanted me to bring in some of the apps that I've written. And one of the things that I wrote, which I don't know if I'm proud to admit this or not, but back in the day as a broke college student, you do what you gotta do to acquire software, and games sometimes. I'm not gonna say exactly what you do, but if you know, you know. And I wrote an app to make it much easier to index and find these things. This is before torrents even existed. If you don't know what that is, Google it, I'm not gonna go into all that stuff. And so I walk into Blizzard with a floppy disk, back when those were a thing, with my app that indexes stuff. And because they wanted to see what I had written, and I explained it, and they said, yeah, that sounds cool, show us how it works. And the QA manager, he pops it in and he sees it, and I said, yeah, just type anything you're looking for. He types it in, and he finds an index of movies. And he's like, so I just click on this button, it'll download it? I'm like, yeah, but I wouldn't suggest doing it from here. And he's like, can I make a copy of this? Like, I guess so? It was very strange. And I got the job, and he got a copy of the app, so I guess we both won that day. QA, for those that don't know, it stands for quality assurance, and it is pretty much the bottom floor of the game industry. Most developers start out there. There's no shame in it, and it gets you a very, very good understanding of how a game studio operates and how games are made. It is typically a very thankless job. Oftentimes, you're the punching bag of the company, but I mean, somebody's got to be. So for the first few months at Blizzard, I would focus on, actually, I'll go into that stuff later. I'm boring you guys, I'm just going to quickly zip through this. So I'll go back to the Blizzard stuff later. I'm jumping around in my talk now in my head. I need more of my energy drink. Oh, that's a lot of feedback. Okay, so after Blizzard, graduated from UCI in 2003, barely. But it was enough to get a degree, and I was fine. And then in 2006, started my own indie studio with a couple college buddies that I graduated with. We released a game called IGF and Hyperbol on Steam, and also made a Flash version of an old game called Star Control. After that, found myself at Obsidian, working on a few unannounced titles, and also worked on Fallout New Vegas and became their lead producer. So hopefully you guys have heard of that game and might have enjoyed it. That game was very difficult to make, but we made it. And then after that, Obsidian had a bunch of layoffs. They pretty much axed almost half the company. And so me and everybody that was on my team was mostly affected by it. And so we decided to go back to my indie company and do a Kickstarter for another game called Steam Bandits. Fast forward up to 2013, and somehow the people in IG Orange County wanted me to be their chapter president. And I still am to this day, and they say I'm doing okay at it, but we'll see. And then, up until recently, I think as of last June, I joined Night Dive Studios, and I'm the game director on a new System Shock game. For those that aren't familiar with System Shock, it's basically what BioShock and Dead Space were based on. And they came out with 2 games in the early to late 90s, and then it was pretty quiet for a while, and now it's coming back. So, how do you listen to a talk? That's a picture of me giving a talk, by the way. I've done this kind of thing before, but it's still kind of stressful, so I still need an energy drink that is just an energy drink. So, the anatomy of a game developer talk. First, they talk about their intro. Why should you listen to them? What have they done? What makes them so special? Already covered that one. Next, the speaker typically talks either about stories or opinions, they're mostly their own opinions, or they talk about their conclusions. And then they try to convince you how their conclusions are the right conclusions and should be your own conclusions. And then maybe they have some cool charts. Spoilers, this doesn't have charts. I'm sorry. And then they have a Q&A. That's a typical structure of it. Talks can vary sometimes. And then what talks tend to be about? All disciplines. And by disciplines, I mean there's the programming discipline, art discipline, animation, there's 3D art, there's 2D art, there's audio, there's production, there's marketing, there's biz dev, all sorts of stuff. And then most of the time, those talks are actually promoting something, and they want you to either buy something or take that information back to a company that you're working for and get them to acquire a license for it. It's really, really tough to sort through those things. So before getting into this, I believe I asked Matthew about this earlier, but just show of hands, which of you here want to get into the industry for programming? Good chunk. Art? Hey, good job. There's at least one. Other. Okay, a few. So a lot of this will be about programming and the other tracks, so production, business development, running a team, and then we'll have a Q&A session where you guys can ask all sorts of questions. I've pretty much done everything except for art. I've tried to do art, and I've been told I'm bad at it, so now I don't do it anymore. So, when it comes to talks and the people speaking, let's talk about conclusions, stories, and opinions, because it's very, very important to understand the distinction. Conclusions are much like Palpatine. By the way, I love using Star Wars references in my talks because everybody knows Star Wars, and if you don't, you really should. So they tell you how to do things, and then they want you to implicitly trust them because they know things, but they won't typically back it up. And they're typically people in the industry that have been around for a while, that are stuck in doing things a certain way, and then they will tell you how to do things because it's given them great success. And they're typically selling something. Either they're selling consulting services for making more games, or they're trying to market a new VR technology or something, but you typically can't trust people that are only giving you conclusions and not backing them up with any reasonable stories or factual information or charts. Charts can be tricky though, they can fool you, because we want to trust charts, but sometimes they lie. The next type, stories, and I think you're getting a sense of what is the good and bad side of this. So somebody that has stories, they've seen a lot. They've been in the industry for a while, they've seen the good and the bad, they've seen some shit. They can talk for hours about the old times. For any of you that go to a weekly event that are of drinking age, there's a weekly game developer event called Beer Wednesday in Tustin. And that's where a lot of game developers go to drink, unwind after they've been just very, very stressed out, and they just talk about stories. It's really, really fun. If you haven't been there, it's worth going there, though it's kind of hard to find the game developers that are just want to talk about stuff, so just buy some people drinks and then they'll start talking to you. And they're also interested in helping the next generation. So in my case, the reason why I like giving these talks is I've seen a lot of things. I'm not going to tell you guys how to think. I'm not going to give you guys conclusions. I'm just going to tell you what I've been through, and you can form your own conclusions based on that. I'm just going to give you guys stories. The next type are the opinions. These are speakers that have minimal experience in the industry, but a lot of opinions. They share their opinions based on the experience of others, or articles that they've read, or blogs. They claim to know things, but in truth, they're just regurgitating what they've already seen from others and spinning their own opinions on it. Be very, very careful of these people. A good way to fact check is to always check somebody's LinkedIn profile. Any speaker that's out there, if you're not using LinkedIn, everybody uses it once you get into the industry. It's actually more important than a resume these days, at some places. So always make sure that you have your LinkedIn profile fleshed out, even if it's just hobbyist, like side project experience. If you have no professional experience, that's fine. I mean, you can list some student projects and stuff. But the people that share their opinions, their LinkedIn profiles look very sparse. So always do a background check on people that you're listening to, just so that you can scrutinize and be sure that you're getting the right type of factual information. And this applies for the rest of the week as well. Like, you can use this formula on all the speakers. Wow, there's like feedback coming to it. Dan, how do I fix that? Do I make it lower?
Yeah, and try not to rub it. Just like that.
I don't know, maybe I should go, like, can you guys hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just ditch this piece of technology?
Go ahead.
Like this? It's really old technology too. There we go. Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yeah.
Now it feels more personal. Okay, hopefully I don't lose my voice though. But yeah, so for the rest of the week, hopefully some of you guys are going to the future talks. Some of those people know exactly what they're talking about. They're going to give you great stories about things. I don't think a whole lot of them are going to share conclusions because they're not trying to sell you something. They're not trying to make you think a certain way. But there might be some people that offer opinions. Always be careful of opinions. And they're not really taken seriously, at least by people in the industry. For people that are about to start in the industry, it's very, very easy for them to influence like the newbies or the people that are green just entering the industry because you don't really know what to look for yet. So a lot of this is actually based on what I have seen in the industry in my journey in the last 15 plus years, starting with going to GDC. You guys mostly know what GDC is? It stands for Game Developers Conference. It's happening next month. It's in San Francisco. The structure of GDC, it's stupid expensive. So I don't even go to the expensive stuff anymore because it's not worth it in my opinion. Unless like there's like a really critical talk you need to go to, but they have their talks available online now and it's much cheaper. But a good chunk of those talks do follow this formula. There's people there that are just giving you conclusions and trying to sell you something. There's people there that are giving you postmortems. Postmortem is when they look back on a project that they have done and analyze it and give you a lot of hindsight information, which is incredibly important because learning from other people's mistakes is how you prevent your own mistakes. Or in theory, if people follow history. And then you find the people that are giving their opinions, which happens a lot at GDC. Little known fact, the people that give talks at GDC get a free pass to go to all the other talks at GDC. So there's some people that actually give talks for the purpose of just going to the other talks and just do the bare minimum of what they think other people want to hear. So it gets murky. It costs like $1,000 for a pass. So I wouldn't suggest it unless there's something there in particular that you really, really want to go to or you have a huge dispensable income. But I don't know. So anyways, the best talks I've been to. If you don't know who that man is, I'll probably give a talk in the future about him. That's Will Wright. He is the creator of SimCity, The Sims, Spore. For those that aren't familiar with Spore, that game came out, geez, almost like 8 years ago or so.
2008.
Huh?
2008. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so close to 8 years. Oh, okay, good job. One of the interesting things about Spore is that No Man's Sky, which came out recently and got a lot of flack for not delivering on all their promises, Spore kind of did the same thing. It talked a big game, made some early interesting promises, and when the game came out, it didn't necessarily deliver on those promises, but I still really like the game. And Will Wright was the guy behind it. He has given the best talks that I've ever been to, primarily because they're very entertaining talks. My talks will not come close to that. For example, in the middle of his talks, like there would be a giant Russian music blaring, and it would be his Russian Space Minute, where for a minute he would just talk about the Russian space program. And then move on to his talks about procedural generation of creatures in Spore. Great segue. So, how the best talks stand out? They're conveying knowledge. The reason why you should be going to talks is to learn something. Sadly, once you graduate, you're not going to be done learning. You always need to be learning. So really, my time at UCI taught me how to learn. And that's kind of how you guys should be seeing it as well. This is kind of the boot camp for learning how to learn things in the future. They convey personal experience. So oftentimes, the best talks talk about postmortem, so things that they've done in the past or their journey on how to get through to things. But typically in a talk, there's maybe, I don't know, 15 to 20% of the information you'll actually find useful and apply to the future. The rest of it might feel like a waste of your time, but who knows, you might think about something later that was inspired from a talk. And then sharing research. That's incredibly useful. So the people that share research, there's talks out there where they condense a bunch of articles, studies, and then present it in a slide deck of a talk with a bunch of pretty charts, and that is a good compressed way of absorbing information. I don't think you guys are going to see a lot of that during Game Developer Week. Most of the talks here will probably just be about personal experience or postmortems of things, but we'll see. So yeah, postmortems, roundtables are incredibly fun. What a roundtable is basically they get a bunch of tables, and everybody that goes to that talk sits around the roundtable, and there's typically a topic. Could be about indie game development. And then anybody at the round table can just start sharing their story. And so you're hearing stories from your peers about stuff. And typically forming new contacts or connections. Some round tables could be about building teams. And there might be some people there that are looking to build a team. And so it's just a great overall experience. Funny story, I actually found the lawyer that I use for my indie company through a roundtable about game law. He and I were sitting next to each other, and I was there to learn more about law. He was there to learn more about games, and we're like, you know, we could just learn from each other. And he's like, really, would you do that for me? I'm like, well, would you do free legal stuff for me if I give you free game development knowledge? He's like, yeah, that sounds like a good deal. I'm like, that sounds like a better deal for me, but okay. Still close friends to this day. And then panels. Panels are a real treat, especially depending on the panelists. For example, at GDC, there's a panel that they have every year called the Game Designer Challenge, where there's some crazy wild topic like, I don't know, what was a wacky one? Make watching grass grow fun and engaging in a video game. And so they'd pick like 5 amazing game designers, get them all on a panel and see how they would solve those problems. And they'd each have presentations walking through just how grass growing simulator is like the most engaging, best thing ever. But you don't really learn a lot from those panels. They're more for entertainment. But I mean, it's not bad. And it's always fun to see some of the really influential people in the industry try to tackle these problems, just hearing how their brains work. Because everybody's brain works differently, and there's always something to learn from somebody's brain until we get like one of those USB bioport jacks in our brains. Still waiting. Okay, so that was really, really quick because those are just the main things you need to look for whenever you encounter a talk, including my own. So before we move on, does anybody have any questions about any of the terms? Feel free to raise your hand. Yes?
You mentioned that some of the best talks have sharing research, but you also mentioned the opinion talks talk about things that they use what other people say to back them up. So the sharing research talks, do those also have stories?
They can. So a good example of a research talk, I gave a talk a few years ago about the free-to-play space, and so this is a bit of a tangent, but it's also related to answering your question. I despise free-to-play monetization, anything that gouges players. You guys know what it is, like, oh, you're out of energy, pop another quarter in the slot and you can keep playing the game. Nah, that's lame. And so I gave a talk sharing research about how this actually loses players over time. It is coercive game design, and it pollutes the industry. And any game that has tried to do this makes a quick buck, but eventually loses their players. And any players that were playing that game aren't interested in other games because that gives them a negative experience of games. And basically through the research, just showing logically how if you want to make a successful and thriving company, you should not have very punishing monetization. That's not necessarily an opinion because there's facts that back it up. An opinion would be players find that these games are stupid. And like, why? Why do they find them to be stupid? Like, just because. It's obvious, right? These games are dumb. That's an opinion. But if you have research to back it up, studies, I'd say an average sampling size, maybe 100 to 200 users polled and then plotting the statistics of them, you can trust that. What you can't trust is one person claiming that based on their hunch or their gut feeling what certain percentages are. So for example, when I said 20% of the content you find in talks will be useful, that's my opinion. That is not backed up by fact or anything. Or when I said, like at GDC, a good chunk of the talks are conclusions, opinions, or stories, the percentage that I gave for that, again, opinion. I'm not using any facts to back it up. It's just what I have seen personally, and I'm just aggregating that data mentally. So opinions are not necessarily entirely bad, because some of them are based on experience and educated guesses. But by and large, if there is a talk that is entirely about opinions, it is very, very questionable. If a talk has some opinions sprinkled in there, that tends to be okay. But if it's entirely opinions about why somebody thinks a certain way and why you should think that way too, you should be on your guard for it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay, I'm going to take another swig. Round 2. So, now I'm going to tell you my story. It's going to be boring. So, I've been a gamer since 4 years old. I started on the Commodore 64. That was a very, very old computer. Moved on to the Amiga, and then got an NES, and then an SNES, and just been gaming my entire life since. And I think you could actually plot a graph for my grades going down to the games I'm playing going up. But I mean, that should be a familiar story to everybody. Just don't go overboard. Moderation is the best. I started working on side projects around the age of 20. So coming to UCI, finding some like-minded people that wanted to also make video games. We didn't have the VGDC back then. I wish we would have had like some kind of video game club, but we didn't. So instead, I actually found most of my core group through LAN parties. Back in the olden days, a bunch of people would bring their computers and their giant CRT monitors to somebody's house, plug everything in together, and play multiplayer deathmatch stuff. And then I went to my first GDC at 22. Back then, it wasn't stupid expensive, and they actually had some really good student discounts. I think I got an all-access pass for like something like 100, 200 bucks, and that got me to go into all the talks, and it was an overwhelming amount of information. So to give you an idea of what GDC typically is structured like, from Tuesday to Thursday, from about 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., there's 1 hour talks back to back, and then a break for lunch. And so a crap load of talks about any discipline. There's programming talks, art talks, business talks, tons of things. And it's a lot of information to absorb. And you tend to find the distribution of conclusions, stories, and opinions. Back then, I didn't know the difference. And so every talk I would go to, I thought it was just amazing knowledge coming from atop a mountain, and I was trying to absorb all of it like a sponge. Looking back in hindsight, I realized that some of these people that were giving talks were just trying to get a free pass so they can go to other talks. They were promoting a product, like the latest game that they were working on, and their marketing team paid for them to go there and give this talk presenting this cool new rendering technique that they've understood, and their game's going to be out next month. You just kind of need to look at things and with a grain of salt. And that's a picture of me at the GDC after going to lots of talks, not having a lot of sleep, and driving up there, and when I had hair, and before laser eye surgery. So, shortly after GDC, actually before that, I was also working at Blizzard. In 2001, I got a job at Blizzard in their QA department, starting on an expansion for Diablo 2. And then doing QA stuff, and let me warn you, if you do get a job in QA, it can be mind-numbing and tedious because you're not getting paid to play games all day. That is such a huge misunderstanding that the general populace has, but basically you're getting paid to play one thing over and over. So for example, in the case of Diablo 2, start the game with this character and make sure all animations look good from every angle of attack for every attack in the game, and you go through a checklist, mind-numbing, over and over. But it's necessary, and you find bugs that way. And so the job of a QA person is typically to find those bugs, report them through some bug database, and then verify once those bugs get fixed. It's a necessary thing. A lot of people in the industry start out that way. That's how I started. After a few months, I had some ideas for automation because I was also going to UCI for programming. And so I shared those ideas with the QA manager, who was also really enjoying the application that I let him copy. And he knew that I did tool stuff. And so I got some ideas for making people's lives easier in the QA department. I think the first app I wrote was something that let QA people jump between different versions of the game so they could do patch testing more quickly. And I started thinking of more and more applications which could make people's lives easier in the QA department and allow them to do their jobs more efficiently and more quickly. And so more and more testing was happening with the fewer resources that they had for the QA department. I don't want to say that I was making other people's jobs obsolete, but it always kind of stuck in the back of my mind because I was making some tools that kind of automated what some people were already doing, but they just had to move those people onto other things. So I didn't make robots to replace humans, but it would have been cool. After that, moved on to working on Warcraft 3 and more tools, now not just for the QA department, but for most of the other departments. Just helping them with just small things. Most of my tools work actually happened in WoW for like a bunch of the designers in other departments. But for Warcraft 3, it was mostly tools for the support team, QA department again, jumping versions back and forth with stuff. Just general things whenever, and you guys know, like assessing requirements for a client or a customer, you know, basic software engineering principles you can apply to the game industry, and often you do. And in this case, the QA department were essentially the customers. And so I would observe what they would do on a day-to-day basis and see how software automation could make their lives easier. The real crazy stuff is what I made later, but I'll get to that after this next bit of the story. So for Warcraft 3, they did layoffs in 2002 on my birthday. It really sucked, but layoffs are a common thing that happen in the industry as well, especially when you're on the lower end of the totem pole in the QA department. And even though I was a tools programmer writing tools, I'm not sure if I really should say this, but I mean, it's been a long time. I was not officially on the books as a tools programmer. Because I was still young and dumb in the industry, it was a part-time gig because I was still going to school. They said, okay, well, we're going to still pay you the QA salary, but you can do programming instead. And I thought about it, and I said, is this negotiable? I'm like, sorry, our other positions are full-time. I'm like, well, so my choice was I could either do QA work or programming, but the pay was non-negotiable. I figured I enjoyed programming more, and it's better experience, and I was interfacing with more of the company that way. So I said, okay, I'll write tools, and they actually put me in a very dark corner of the QA department. There was no lighting there, so nobody really knew I was there or what I was doing. But they knew that I was writing tools, they just didn't understand what I was doing. And then they'd also start just piling extra computers near me as like a storage area, so I was really in a cave. Which also gave me a lot of fun autonomy, because nobody really knew how any of my tools worked. Should I say these things? Why not? Nobody's going to watch this video anyway. So there was one point, and I'm not saying that Blizzard did or did not have a server in their company which had music of a certain format. I don't know. Maybe. But if they did, it would have been really, really cool to access that stuff while from home. So there were a few people there that asked if I could find a way for them to, supposedly, hypothetically, if this thing existed, for them to listen to their music while they were at home, even though the music was, hypothetically, in an internal location. So I found a way to do that and made an app for them that did that pretty quickly, and they were pretty happy about it. This is before people really had firewalls and companies had external IPs that were insecure, and so it was very, very easy to do those things, hypothetically, and people were hypothetically happy with it. A lot of that type of stuff happened back then. Also, fun fact, back in the olden days, when people were running like Windows XP and such, some people would just share their entire C drive. And one of my hobbies was just sniffing around the network, seeing who had their crap shared. And there were some people there that had some videos on their hard drives, which they should not have at work. The things you find, and I'm sure people are still finding things from insecure stuff, but if you like security or holes in security, there is also a job for that in the game industry, as you guys probably already know. So anyways, back to the layoffs. So word came down that the entire QA department needed to get laid off. And my name on paper was part of the QA department. Even though I was writing tools, it wasn't on the books that I was a programmer. And so I went to my manager and said, look, I'm writing tools, and I'm in the middle of some tools that other departments are depending on, and if I leave, I won't be able to maintain them, and there's this huge server migration that the IT department wants to do, and when that happens, all these tools are going to break because I won't be around to update stuff. And the QA manager's like, well, let me ask my boss. He goes up and he asks his boss, he comes back and he says, yeah, sorry, I can't do anything about it because you work in QA. I'm like, but I'm doing programming. I'm like, yeah, but my boss doesn't know that. I'm like, what? So I said, fine, you know what, and this was summer of my junior year, about to go into my senior year, and I thought, you know what, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. I can just focus on working on studying my senior year, and then go back into the game industry when I graduate. And then another funny story is, one of the friends that I had in the QA department, as we were walking out the door, because you need to do your exit stuff, he and I were talking, and I was saying, damn it, this sucks, and it's my birthday too. And he looks at me and he's like, it's my birthday. And I'm like, whoa, we have the same birthday. Like the weirdest things you find out when you get laid off with somebody. Anyways, so I focused on my senior year, graduated with like a 3.1 or a 3.2, I don't remember anymore. It didn't really matter, as long as I graduated. And I focused on school. Then there was a course called ICS 187. I don't know if you guys still have it, but it was a game project course taught by Dan Frost. I don't know if he's still around doing things.
No.
Yeah?
He just left.
Oh, that was one of my favorite courses, because in that course they would bring in other game developers that were local, and I think the guy that came in to talk for us one time was Tim Kane, who I later worked with at Obsidian. So that was just a really, really great interaction because I like poked him and I said, hey, I talked to you when I was a student at school. And he looks at me and is like, fuck you for making me feel old. I'm like, okay then. So that's kind of a picture of what it looked like. So for the course, me and a few friends, and these are the friends that I've been working with on the side for the past year trying to make a game. We made a multiplayer game, which basically was a MOBA before there were MOBAs, called Hyperbol, because we wanted to be very punny. And so that's the computer lab back in the day with all those CRTs, and I think that's Professor K. I don't know if he's still here, but yeah, that's him from 15 years ago.
What?
I don't know how he looks now, so. And
Where did he change?
I'll give you guys a moment.
The lab looks the same, but he looks completely different.
Even the floors and stuff, and like the crappy desks.
Yeah,
I'm
the
sorry.
desks are the same. It's the same desk.
Do people still sleep in the lab?
Yeah.
Yeah! I did it all the time. For the last day of 187, it was demo week, and so we had 2.5 months to make a game. So we made a fast-paced multiplayer game, which I designed as the ultimate LAN party game. It was using the tactics that you'd find in an old game called Worms, which is still around doing stuff, except in real time, using a lot of RTS sort of strategies. The problem was that we didn't have any artists on the team, except for a programmer who thought he could do art. And he does, but it's programmer art. And what ended up happening was we basically took sounds from Command & Conquer for a lot of our weapon effects, as well as the GUI and everything. But the game worked. It was multiplayer connected, written in a custom engine. This is before the age of Unity and Unreal stuff, unfortunately. And when we demoed it in the lab, we had it on, I think, 6 or 8 stations. And it was very confusing to people that walked in because they thought they were just going to be seeing one game. Everybody else there at their kiosk, they just had one station because they were just showing off one game, but we had a multiplayer requirement. And so what ended up happening that day is we'd have so many people like playing this visceral LAN party game, yelling at each other, as you do at LAN parties, while there were other games behind us with like single player, like artsy sort of things, and they were looking at us with very nasty looks because it was almost like we were stealing their customers. But I mean, it was a very, very fun experience. I'm not going to show you the game because I'm kind of embarrassed by it. I mean, you guys, like, you won't know this yet, but you'll look back several years from now on the stuff you're working on now and be like, oh my god, I was an idiot. It'll happen. So anyways, so after I graduated from UCI, I actually got a job in the app industry for about 4 months. And I concluded that I hated it. There was just something alluring about the game industry and being around a lot of people that were gamers and that culture. In a normal app development job, I mean, it's a mixture of people with interests. And I found that I really missed working with people that were watching the latest episode of Star Trek or were into Game of Thrones. I mean, things that you can have office conversations. Whereas like in app development, you're talking about like, oh, did you see America's Next Top Model the other day? Or like all this other like, oh, what about the Real Housewives of OC? I'm like, oh, no, this got my eyes. And so I called Blizzard back. Oh, I forgot to mention. So Blizzard actually called me back during my senior year asking if I wanted to come back and do QA for WoW. They hadn't announced, they just said QA for an MMO, but I knew what the MMO was because they were working on it when I left the first time. And I said, I'm really focused on school. I'm taking a lot of units. Can I call you guys back later? And they said, yeah, sure. We just really want you back, which was flattering. And so I called them back after I completely loathed my app development job, and I said, hey, so do you guys have any openings? I would like to come back and get back into the game industry. And they said, well, and I wasn't talking to the guy that I had actually worked with in the past. And so he said, well, let me get back to him and see if we have any openings. I got an email back like the next day from a different guy, a guy that I had worked with, saying, yes, can you start next week? And I'm like, hey, maybe this. I was like talking to them in December, and I said, well, how's the first week of January? So I start back first week of January in 2004, and there was some mix-up with how they hired me back on because they had grown a bit since I had left, and so they started me again in the QA department and on books with QA pay. And I'm like, fuck it, I just want to get back in the industry. And so within a week of being there, I'm like just doing QA stuff. I'm like, you know what, I'm fine with starting. This is full time. You know, back then I was part time, totally fine. And on WoW, there was a tool which they had internally using the UI scripting language. If you're not familiar with WoW, it has a UI scripting language based on Lua. And so it was fascinating to me because like I saw this, like, wow, there's like GUI stuff in here that we can customize, and I can expand upon this. And I had some ideas. I stayed after hours, and I like wrote up a really stupid quick tool that just added a checkbox to enable God mode for whoever was playing, because that's useful for somebody in QA to just turn on God mode, not take any damage, run through an area, get to their destination, start their test. Stupid simple, just a checkbox. And I emailed the department saying, hey, I wrote this thing, maybe it'll help you. Within a few hours, the department lead, who remembered the stuff that I worked on before, called me into his office and said, hey, can you just do that kind of stuff full time? And I said, I would if you promote me and pay me better. And he said, let me talk to people. And so they talked to people, and they promoted me to a position called QA Technical Engineer, which was basically shorthand for tools programmer. And so from that point on WoW, I was just writing tools, not just for the QA department, but eventually for the GM staff, the designers. The artists didn't really like tools. For those that don't know, artists tend to be very reluctant to learn new tools sometimes, and so you kind of just need to force them to use things for their own good. You'll find that out later. Oh, and also for programmers, most programmers I've worked with think that all artists are idiots, so if you don't think that already, it probably will happen. So one of the interesting, unique tools that I wrote for Blizzard for WoW, man, which designer was it? It's been so long, I forgot the names of some of the people. But basically, if you're familiar with the instance Nomergon, there's a small part in there where you pick up these items that have binary code that translates into an ASCII word. So I'll never forget this because it was such an awkward conversation. A designer that I'd never met comes down to my little cube where I was writing tools and says, hey, so you're Jason, you're that guy that writes tools and stuff, right? Like, yes, I'm a tools programmer. And he says, hey, can you write tools for other departments too? This is before like other people started using me. I was just doing QA stuff. I said, yeah, no problem. And he said, yeah, so I'm designing this area, and is this possible? Can you like make something spit out in binary that's based on a word? And like, I could like translate all the characters to ASCII and then just like encode the ASCII into binary. I mean, that's not too hard. Like, yeah, I don't know how to do that by hand, so like, can you just write me an app that does it? I'm like, yeah, sure. So after a few hours, I write him an app, you input any text string, and then it spits out the encoded binary of it. And he uses that all over the place in Nomergon. And then he tells his other designer friends that I wrote these like small tool things, and they're quickie one-shot things that like would even probably be a homework assignment at UCI for something. And so from there, I started writing tools for the GM team. I wrote some tools that would allow the GMs to work around all sorts of locations and do all sorts of stuff, and so it was fun. And I found that I really, really enjoyed tools programming. And then after hours, I would still work with my old Hyperbol team that I had graduated with because they were still close friends. We still wanted to make games. My passion still was game design. Back then, I don't know if UCI has any game design courses now, but back then there certainly weren't. They do? You guys are so lucky. I had to like just buy a crap load of books, and half of the books were worthless because it was, again, people sharing opinions and not actual knowledge about things. But I mean, you got to go through that with books sometimes. I'm sure even some of the textbooks may not even be the best things in the world. So anyways, after all that stuff, WoW ships, and then since we're still working on Hyperbol, there's a little thing called the IGF at GDC. The IGF stands for the Independent Games Festival, and they have a student showcase. And so the year after we graduated, we submitted it to the student showcase. That's on the left side, and that was in, I think 2004? Yeah, 2004. And the student showcase is not a competitive thing, or at least it wasn't back then. And so we're there with like 10 other students. One of the other students that was there, or maybe it was the following year, but anyways, it was the student team that made Narbacular Drop. And if you're not familiar with what Narbacular Drop is, you might be familiar with the game that they made after that called Portal. And so the story goes from what I heard is that they were at this same event, showing off their game for their school. Gabe Newell walks by, looks at it, and is like, that looks really good. Do you guys just want to have a job over at my place called Valve? You might not have heard of it. And just make this with our people? And the students are like, yes. Sadly, he never walked by our booth. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. But their game's pretty cool too. Funny enough, now I'm working on System Shock, and System Shock has a rogue maniacal AI named Shodan, and that's who GLaDOS was based on. So kind of goes circly. So we played in the student showcase, showing off the game, get a free pass to GDC, go to a bunch of talks. Now I'm starting to learn that some of the talks are not necessarily useful. I also learned what the more entertaining talks are. I learned as much as I could from it. And then after that was over, then a year later, we kept working on Hyperbol, removing the copyrighted materials from Command & Conquer and Red Alert. We found an artist, which was our programmer's brother, to make art for the game, started improving the graphics a bit and getting it feeling a bit better, and then submitted again the following year for the IGF Independent Games Competition, where they pick 10 finalists, and then they have an award stuff. We made it as one of the 10 finalists. We submitted a beta of our game. Lesson, never ever submit a beta or anything that's incomplete to a competition, because you will be competing against other games that are already finished. So you'll be weakening your position entirely. And it's very, very difficult to resubmit to these things again, so it's better to wait and submit to a competition that you feel like you can actually have a competitive chance against other games. So the following year, 2005, we make it as a finalist in the competition. I think we got third place. Other games that were there, there was a game called Alien Hominid, which was one of the early games from a company called The Behemoth, which later went on to make Castle Crashers, and a bunch of others, probably heard of them, as well as another game called Darwinia, which was made by a studio in the UK, and they later went on to make Prison Architect, which is on Steam now doing stuff. So after that, that picture actually was from an article from the OC Register. They did an interview with us because we were the only local team from California that was a finalist, and so we were talking to one of the reporters, answering questions and stuff, and they asked, like, what are our day jobs? That's the entire team, just me and three friends. None of these guys had jobs in the industry. It was just me. I was the only one that had a full-time job. He was a programmer, and that was our artist. The two programmers had jobs doing application development work, but they wanted to get into the industry. And our artist had a job doing illustration for like a marketing company. And so the OC Register really latched on to the fact that I worked at Blizzard. So I get back from GDC, and I get called into an office at Blizzard, and they have the paper right there, and they say, so, Jason, it sounds like your project is starting to get more attention. And I'd already told them that I was working on this side project, and they were okay with it, because they looked at the game, they concluded that it in no way could compete with anything Blizzard is working on. But the problem they had is that since it was getting press attention, it might be confusing to people, and so they basically gave me a choice. The choice was I could either keep working at Blizzard, or I work on my side project with my friends. I couldn't do both. That was a very tough choice. If you ever look back on your life and wonder if you should have zigged instead of zagged, that's probably my biggest zig point. So I decided to leave Blizzard and stick with my friends, because we were about a year away from finishing our game. None of them had jobs in the industry, but they were hopeful that this could get their foot in the door by shipping a game. And I was having more fun as a game designer than as a programmer. Programming's great and all, but doing it 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, actually 10 hours a day was more realistic for what I was doing. It gets kind of mind-numbing. Some programmers I know can do it non-stop. Again, I was not the best student. I was kind of lazy, so having to just stare at code for 8 hours a day was not in my blood. And it was hurting my eyes. So, left Blizzard and built an office in my dad's dining room. Literally, we actually moved his dining room table against the window, and our programmer set up a laptop there, and then moved the kitchen table, and that's where my computer was, then had another fold-up table with a laptop, and drank a crapload of soda, and cup of noodles, and basically just making a game on the cheap. This is the typical scenario you would find for an indie developer. And it was great. I mean, looking back, in every place that I have worked, like Blizzard, Obsidian, and now Night Dive, and then doing consulting work, that was the most enjoyable time of my life. Mainly because it's the best thing in the world to make a game with close friends. Because it's people that you already know, that you synergize with, you're on the same wavelength, and you're working towards a common goal that everybody believes in. So if you are not already working on a game project with friends, I highly recommend it. Because you don't know where your path is going to take you. And the earlier you attempt these risks, the safer you'll be. Because, I mean, now is the time in your lives to take the risks. Because you don't have families you need to support, maybe. You don't have crippling student loan debt, maybe, probably. You probably do. But, I mean, even still, later on in your life, there will be more things that factor into your decision-making process. And doing an indie project and bootstrapping yourself on the cheap will then seem more risky. If you get into a relationship or you get married, you know, there's going to be other considerations for financial things, saving up for a house, health insurance, job security, projecting out like, well, I need to be able to have work for at least another year because we're raising a kid and doing all this other stuff. So many things factor into your mind, but probably you're not right now, so this is the right time to just try crazy things. And that's what we did. So we just made a game in our dining room. We would often do 7-Eleven runs and just grab Slurpees and horrible, horrible diet, but it was great. So a year later, after leaving Blizzard, we finished a game called Thread Space Hyperbol. I hated the name Hyperbol from the beginning because it was too punny. So I really wanted it called something that was less punny. So we compromised and put something in front of it, calling it Thread Space Hyperbol because it's supposed to be a series of games that we were going to be working on. We launched it July 12th, 2007, also my birthday. Funny thing that happens when you run your own company, you can determine when you launch your own game. And so it might not be a coincidence that we launched it also my birthday. And there's the Steam store page for it. It's like a spacey MOBA style thing. There aren't a whole lot of players now, so if you check it out, there's also like a free demo for it. Just be prepared, it's just going to be a bunch of bots and me doing a terrible job at VO with the tutorial because it was a small team. It was the 42nd game to ever launch on Steam. And I wear that as a badge, because if you're not familiar with what the significance is of 42, then you shouldn't be a programmer. And we were also the 8th developer to ever work with Valve, which is actually pretty interesting now, because I still talk to Valve for the other games that I work on. And the people I talk to that are still handling our account and stuff are now super, super senior, like second to Gabe. But they still handle our stuff for nostalgia reasons, because like we were one of the earlier games that used them. This is before there were even Steam achievements. We put achievements in our game and had like some back-end database system, and then later Valve was talking to us when they were developing the Steamworks system for their achievements, and so there was some back and forth with our programmer and their program about how they should implement their achievement system. It was kind of weird, and I should have gotten something in writing that gave us a kickback from it, but I was business dumb. That's another thing that happens when you're fresh out of school and you have a degree in computer science, but on business, you get taken advantage of from a business side as well. So another bit of advice is if you don't have anybody business savvy on your project and you plan on starting a studio, find a business guy you can trust. It'll just save you more headaches in the end and decrease your chance of failure in the future. So I'm starting to lose my voice, but luckily there's still more of this left. Moving on. Then, stuff happened. So we launched the game. I think it sold about 10 or 20,000 units. Not a huge amount, but it did okay back then. We had no sense of how to market something, so we just threw a game out there and hoped people saw it. And back then, it was very, very hard to find Steam games that just got released. The store page was definitely not like what you would see it now. So we didn't really know what we were doing from a business or marketing standpoint, and not a whole lot of people saw it. So we started doing contract work for other publishers, porting games from one platform to another, and just surviving month to month with the bills that we would have. And then eventually, one publisher that we were working with couldn't pay us for 3 months worth of work. And that really sucked because then everybody else on the team, they couldn't get paid. By the way, by that time, everybody else had quit their day jobs and they were just doing full-time indie work with us. But when a publisher couldn't pay us, we had no choice. We had to fold up and get day jobs doing other things. And so One of the programmers, Matt, he got a job at a company down the street called Red. They do like high quality camera stuff. Another one of the programmers, my lead programmer, Nick, he got a job at Double Helix, which was then bought by Amazon. Now he's a tech director or a lead tech person at Amazon. But basically the team had to split up, and that was pretty shitty. And for me, I had already been talking to Obsidian and their CEO because there was some deal that we were going to be doing with Atari to work on an Neverwinter Nights expansion, but then, and it was going to be crazy because like they were going to, I'm not sure I can say how much it was for. Fuck it. It was for $1 million to work on an Neverwinter Nights expansion with another developer in Canada to do the design content. They wanted to use our technology and systems design work with another developer's content design to do an expansion. And that was a huge amount of money for us because we were living on the cheap, and that would have been perfect for us to bootstrap the company. But at the same time, Obsidian had one of their games canceled by a publisher they were working with. And in order to prevent themselves from having to do layoffs, they hit up Atari again and basically requested to Atari that they do the expansion instead, because they really needed a project. And so since they had a right to first option, for those who don't know what a right to first option means is basically somebody calling dibs. So Obsidian had the right to call dibs on working on the expansion. And so they executed that right, and so we couldn't work on it anymore, which was unfortunate. But then the following week, Obsidian CEO Fergus took me out to lunch to apologize. It was the best prime rib sandwich I've had in my life. Probably very expensive too. And at the same time, he got to know what our team makeup was, what I did, and he got very interested in offering me a job. But that didn't happen until 3 months later after we were doing more contract stuff, and then I hit him up again, and I said, look, times were just really, really tough for the team, and we're looking for work now. And so he offered me a job as a producer at Obsidian, and back then I had no idea what a producer even did. Matt, do you know what a producer does? You're supposed to be one.
Yeah, we manage projects and stuff. Yay! But
That's what a producer does. But I didn't know that. So instead I explained to him that I started the company, I did a lot of design work, I still dabbled in some programming, but most of my day-to-day was spent managing the team and keeping everybody focused towards the same goal. And the Obsidian CEO said, okay, that sounds like a producer. You should be a producer. We really need good producers. Like, sure, I need work. Great. And so they hire me without knowing what they want to throw me at, because I guess the goal is to hire me before I went back to Blizzard or something, which was also a very strong option. But I don't know. I kind of was feeling pretty defeated with the team splitting up, and so I just went to the first offer that was available. If that ever happens to you and you need it and you go through dismantling an indie team, you will have a lot of offers. So don't do what I did. Definitely see what other offers are out there and see what fits you best, and try to get over the loss of a team as quickly as possible so that you can be as focused as you can to make the best decision for your future. I'm not saying I regret going to Obsidian, but I certainly was not in the right frame of mind to make a good decision. So it could have been a good decision, but I was too depressed to really see it. So I started off at Obsidian working on a unreleased Aliens RPG based on the movie Aliens. They were making an RPG for it. It gets canceled a month after I'm there due to no fault of my own. It was on its way. That's what I tell myself. And then shortly after that, they sign a project to do Fallout New Vegas. And they attached me to that project, and I'm working with an amazing team of people. And I'm on that project as a mid-level producer. And then about 6 or 8 months into it, the producer that was in charge of it starts moving on to other things, and they make me the lead producer to basically see it through to finishing it out and the DLCs for it, and which was a really, really great experience. And I also got to do some programming on the project because their tools were not that great. And I saw a problem, and I said, yeah, you know, it takes like weeks to build this stuff, and we can have it building in like a day, and like I could do this. But then when I would pitch it to my boss, they would say, well, yeah, but we need you full-time doing this stuff. I said, fuck it, I'll do it after hours. It's just going to save people time. And so I got a programmer credit in New Vegas because of it, which is pretty cool. So after New Vegas, I started going back to my roots with game design stuff and pitched a few projects internally. Some of them started getting traction and we were pitching them to publishers. And I was getting my confidence again as a designer because I kind of felt defeated after the poor sales of Hyperbol. And I mean, because it was basically a project that I had designed in college and I was building on a fundamentally broken design. And I don't know, I didn't know any better. So if you have any student projects that you're working on, just never ever be afraid to shoot the baby in the head if it's bad. My biggest failing with the Hyperbol franchise was that I kept it going and kept building on a rickety foundation. But it shipped. Let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, so unannounced projects, doing some design stuff, really, really cool things. And then some financial difficulties happened at Obsidian, and they had to shut down any project that was at the incubation stage, including the project that I was in charge of. But then they moved me on to another unannounced project, and I was on that for about 6 months, and then they hit another financial hardship and then laid off half of the company. Again, layoffs are sadly a standard thing in the industry. And I thought to myself, you know what? I've been making games for like the last, at that point it was like, I was at like the 6-year point or so, and I had never taken a vacation. So I was just gonna take time off and not worry about stuff. But the night after, oh wait, I'm skipping through, oh yeah, here's what I did at Obsidian, by the way. And unannounced stuff. There we go, that's Obsidian. Oh man, and I skipped the FNV launch. Sorry, I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. The coolest thing about launching a game with a high profile publisher like Bethesda is the launch party. So New Vegas's launch party took place in Las Vegas, appropriately. They had like all their huge props and stuff from E3 and so much alcohol, so much food. They had a live band there that I wasn't really into. Geez, who was it? Like Vampire Weekend or something like that? I don't know, it wasn't my kind of thing. But the coolest part of it was I got to meet all the voice actors for New Vegas, because oftentimes when you work on a project, the voice actors are kind of insulated from the rest of the team. They work in like a voice acting studio, and then they just send you the WAV files or MP3s that you put in the game. So I got to meet some of these voice actors for the first time and get drunk with them. The first person I got drunk with was Colonel Ty from Battlestar Galactica. And let me tell you, in Galactica, he was not really acting so much. That is just him. He likes drinking, and he is a really, really fun guy. He would just tell us stories constantly about like what it was like on set and how he's still really good friends with Edward James Olmos, the guy who played Adama. And just a really, really fun person to hang out with. And he really likes his beer, and he can hold his liquor. Next person was Wayne Newton. Not really a fan of his music, but I mean, it's Wayne frickin' Newton. If you don't know who he is, he's basically a huge Vegas show performer, does songs and stuff. Your parents probably love him. And then Felicia Day. And also getting photobombed by some of my coworkers. Funny fact, Felicia Day is actually pretty short. And she loves dancing when she gets drunk. And cigars. Yeah, that's right. But anyway, so launch parties are an incredibly fun thing if you work at a larger studio, because you get to do crazy things like that. Anyways, so on to doing a Kickstarter from the IOCane stuff. So what happened? After the Obsidian layoffs, went to Beer Wednesday just to drink. And then my former coworkers approached me and said, so Jason, what's the next thing you're going to be doing? Because they knew about my past and that I had run an indie studio. And I said, well, I just wanted to take a vacation, really. And they said, yeah, but I mean, we're going to go our separate ways and we want to keep working together. And so I said, well, there's kind of this idea that I had in my back pocket to do like a steampunk Chrono Trigger style game that was like an asynchronous MMO connected, that would have like a mobile app and also a desktop app, and you'd have cross-play between them. And it felt like I was just like shooting concepts that were way over their heads, because none of them were designers or programmers. It was, well, no, there were a few programmers, but not a whole lot of designers, and also some artists. But they loved the idea, because they wanted to do something steampunk. And back then, Kickstarter was still fresh and new. I think the only other Kickstarter project was the Double Fine Adventure, and I think Wasteland 2 was done by that time. So this was before the Pillars of Eternity Kickstarter. And so we said, yeah, let's try a Kickstarter for this. And so right after the layoffs, I just dove right back into game development, pulled my my indie studio out of hibernation, and used a lot of its infrastructure to kind of get the Kickstarter going. Assembled a team of former coworkers and new people that I had met. I think the team size initially, this picture is actually a newer team. I'll get into that in a second. So initially for the Kickstarter, it was about a team of 20 to 30 people, mostly former coworkers, and that's what we kind of pitched to the Kickstarter. It was like we were a bunch of folks that worked on Fallout New Vegas, came off of the Obsidian layoffs, and we wanted to make a game together. And we raised a modest amount, like $55K, because what we were pitching was not what people really wanted, or we weren't good at selling ourselves, essentially. Because we didn't have a business savvy person or a marketing person to make it sound better. And so we started development of it, I think summer of 2012, and then we get to the prototype stage by December, and by prototype, Obsidian gets into a much better financial situation, and they offer everybody their jobs back. And since most of us didn't want to leave in the first place, 80 to 90% of the team decided to go back. Me and our lead artist stayed behind because we felt honor-bound to see this thing through and fulfill the Kickstarter promise. So we stuck around, but the team was gutted, and it was looking pretty grim. And so we took a step back, and we were transparent to our Kickstarter backers the whole time. We explained the situation and what happened. The Kickstarter backers were very supportive, and they encouraged us to keep going. And so we tried recruiting people. And this is the newer team that we recruited to work on the game again. But by the time getting to the recruitment stuff and paying the former team that was working on the project, we'd run out of Kickstarter money completely. So instead, the model was for revenue sharing, which is also another common thing with indie teams, where at the end of the project, a percentage of the profits go back into the team that worked on the game. Because most indie teams, they're bootstrapping their own funding, so they don't have enough to pay full salaries, but there's the promise of future money once the game ships. And so it was a common model that we were using for it. The problem, though, is that when people are not making, I mean, there was still some money coming in, and some people were making some money, but it certainly wasn't enough to like make people happy. And so over time, let's see, do I talk about that? Yes, my 4 years lost at sea. So by the prototype, most of the team members left. Talked about that. There was a constant churn of finding new people and losing people. If you ever do a project or a Kickstarter thing, scope it small, even if you have a lot of people interested. Our problem was we scoped the project for a 30-man team. We lost a good chunk of them, but we maintained that scope, hoping that we could recruit back up to it. And we did. We got back up to about 20 people. But there was just so much time lost in the recruitment phase. I don't think that we actually fully staffed until probably a year later, because it just takes time to find the right people. It's a lot of interviewing. It's a lot of posting in forums, hunting down on LinkedIn, asking friends. And eventually, when we had the right team, people that had been on the team were getting fatigued. They wanted to start families, have children, and they were not making the right type of money to do that. And so there were no hard feelings whenever anybody needed to leave the team. I mean, my philosophy whenever I run a team is they're my family first, and so I want them to be okay. And I think I attribute that to actually TV and good parenting, specifically the show Quantum Leap, if you're not familiar with it. It's about time travel and being a good guy in the past. Let's see, so after losing a good chunk of people and recruiting over and over, it gets exhausting. And when people need to leave the team, I mean, for some people would go actually to Obsidian because that's where I had the most contacts, and if they needed to find work, I would line them up there. But for other people, I mean, I would do whatever I could to give them a good reference or to help them find a home so they can get taken care of. The other problem was that the scope of the game to match the team size would constantly be shrinking, and so it's redefining the requirements for the project, which is incredibly dangerous when you're in development. And so the scope of the project went from a 30-man scope design to then a 20-man scope design. And then after we lost some people, it went down to like a 15-man scope design. Then we got more people, so back up to a 20-man scope design. And so constant back and forth. Not the best idea. And then running out of money really sucks. It was to the point where we needed work done. And in order to get the people that we needed to work on the project, they needed to get paid something. So I started borrowing money. I took out credit cards, I borrowed money from friends and family, I took out loans, and I drove myself stupidly into debt to help pay for people to keep working on the project. Because for some people, I mean, they were fine with not making their full salaries as long as they could pay their rent. And so I would try to get them whatever I could at my own cost. I think by the end of the project, I ended up being 150K in debt. I'm like at the halfway point paying that down, but crippling debt is not fun, kids. As you know, thanks to student loans. But luckily, you guys aren't going to like the Art Institute. Their student loan debts are nuts. There's some people I know there that are paying down like 80K and like 120K loans. Yeah, I see your eyes. Yeah, crazy. So another thing I did to compensate for that, for the loss of money, was I took on consulting work. The funny thing about being in the industry for a while is you learn things, and the things that you learn is actually a marketable skill. And so sometimes there would be companies that would need help for a few months to organize their production process or some design help. And so I'm not that great at finding these gigs, but I've worked with enough people in the industry so that when I basically would make a post saying, hey, does anybody know of any studio that needs some consulting help for stuff? And so I'd find some work every now and then, make some money from it, and then all the money that I would make from it would go back into paying people on the team and paying down the debt that was happening. And so something happened, when was it? Early last year, early 2016, where it was clear that with all the churn and all the people that were going to be on the project scope just needed to change and be finalized. And so the project scope was scoped down to a 4-man scope, even though there were 6 people on the project, keeping it conservative at best. And from that scope, we had a plan in place moving forward with things, but work was still happening slowly. And then one of the consulting gigs that was brought to my attention was actually brought to me by an audio guy that I had worked with on Steam Bandit stuff. And that was from Night Dive Studios for System Shock. They were a small team, fully remote work, and they needed some help organizing their production schedule and figuring out just sort of how do you recruit people and what is the best way to work remotely on things, which is all sorts of stuff that I had learned during my 4 years of running a remote studio and really running on a tight budget. And so I started out the first few weeks. Actually, I just realized this is a similar story to Blizzard. Okay, maybe you guys will see the similarity too. So the first few weeks I started out as a producer, helping them out with their production stuff. And then I noticed they didn't have any systems designers or game designers, and so they needed design docs. And so I just started writing design docs for them, based because I love the original System Shocks, I love BioShock and Dead Space, and so like, you guys don't have any design docs for this, you need documentation to inform the programmers and artists what they're going to be doing. And so from that, I said, okay, I'll write some of this stuff, and let me know if you guys like it. I wrote a few docs, people really liked it, and then I was asked, like, hey, Jason, could you just keep doing that? I'm like, sure, I like doing this better anyway. But my mistake, however, was in an indie project, you wear multiple hats. The big thing you need to know about wearing multiple hats is every hat you wear weighs a lot, because a hat is essentially a full-time job. So the more hats you wear, the heavier a head. Luckily, I didn't have hair, so that wasn't getting in the way of hats. And so I was then wearing the design hat and the producer hat, and those are both 2 full-time jobs. But luckily, it was work that I really loved doing, so I was just putting more time into it. At the same time, after hours, I was trying to find the energy to keep working on Steam Bandit stuff. And I still am. I don't know how I'm able to do it. I think I'm nuts. Or, no, it's energy drinks, actually. Yeah. And so my routine now is, and this is where I am to this day. So, yeah, started out production consulting, became the game director. What a game director is basically the Spielberg of a project. They determine where the project's going, they interface with all the departments and basically guide things in certain directions. Most of the time it's somebody that focuses on a lot of design work, but it really could be a lot of different disciplines as long as it's directing where the game is going. So we did a Kickstarter last summer and raised 1.35 million. It's not a lot by old Kickstarter standards, but compared to current Kickstarter standards, where most people are becoming just very fatigued with Kickstarters that aren't delivering. It was right after the news of Mighty No. 9 just pissing everybody off. Yeah! Going up against that was kind of tough, but the thing that worked in our favor is when we launched the Kickstarter, we also released a demo on Steam. So people could try the game as we were envisioning it before they actually decided to back it, which was a huge help. So if you guys are ever planning on doing a Kickstarter, have a demo or something playable available to people that are not backers yet. That we can give them confidence that where they're putting their money is going to be useful. And so here are some before and afters of the original System Shock compared to what we're doing. As you can see, it really needed a visual overhaul. System Shock, again, is from like the early 90s, and we're putting a modern spin to it. And most of you guys probably haven't played the first System Shock, so we're also gearing the game for people that might have never played the original. Also, I should say that I'm not trying to sell you something. This is not the part of the talk where I'm saying, like, and it's going to be out. Like, no. This is just stories. So, yeah, that's my stuff. Questions? How are we doing on time? Holy crap, I've been talking for an hour and a half. Yes?
What sort of warnings would you have, or like, tips you have on remote development?
I'm glad you asked because I can actually probably give an entire talk on that alone. I'm not going to. I'll just give you the Cliff's Notes version. So I've used a lot of online tech in the last several years, and there's things that work and things that don't work. Some of it depends on the type of team. For example, you need version control no matter what you're doing. A lot of people like using GitHub. I hate GitHub. Let me explain why. I like it personally for personal projects, but on a game project, you're dealing with people of different disciplines. You're dealing with artists, animators, producers. All these people also need to be able to use version control effectively. GitHub, as you guys know sometimes, can throw conflicts or problems, but you guys can navigate those waters and you know how to use it. Artists, however, it's a bit more of a difficult time. And so when they have an issue, they need to ask a programmer for help, which derails the programmer from what they're working on, which costs time. And that's why I'm not a fan of GitHub, because of the time cost of people that are not programmers and just the learning curve behind it all. And yes, they were using GitHub for Windows. It was made as simple as possible, but they still somehow were able to break it. It's just one of those things. So I've actually found the version control solution that is the most frictionless for non-programmers, SVN and Perforce. SVN, completely free. There's GUI tools for it. It makes sense to artists. We even use another tool called SVN Notifier, which is a little app that sits in the system tray, and it changes colors when you have new stuff to check in or there's new stuff to get. So it's super simple. We just tell the artist, right-click on this icon and say update, or right-click on this icon and say commit. They get it. It's beautiful. Perforce, I prefer Perforce, but it's not free. It's free for, I think, up to 10 users, but we have like 20-ish people on our team, so I mean, we could have switched to it, but SVN does the trick, and so that's our current route for version control. The next thing is communication. Communication is vitally important for a remote team. Right now we're using Slack, which is basically a glorified version of a cloud-based IRC. And that's been incredibly helpful for us. We have Slack channels for each department, and then post announcements in there. We use Google Hangouts for our team meetings and department meetings, and that's been great. I mean, in the past we looked at Skype. I even looked at Curse, because Curse now has video calling, but I would not recommend that for Teams yet. Discord is adding some video stuff, but nothing beats Hangouts just from a ease of use standpoint. Even Skype was having issues for us, because in order to get into a group Skype call, people would need to have people in their contact list, invite people manually, whereas with a Hangout, you can create a Google Calendar event, add a video call link to it, and then just have it recurring. And so people could bookmark the link, go back to it in their browser. It's as painless as possible. The other tool that we use is Google Drive for art source assets, so .max files, PSDs, any large files, also for builds of the game, so any large executables. Anything that doesn't belong in version control goes into the Google Drive folder, and everybody seems to really like that workflow. Other than that, what other remote things do we use? That's it, and then email, but email is pretty minimal since we're using Slack. But those are the tools that I would suggest. Other tools that I have my eye on, because the other cool thing about being a tools programmer is you're also addicted to the new tools that come out every day. I love Discord. I think that what those guys are doing is actually more impressive than what the Slack team is doing. Discord doesn't have a message limit, unlike Slack. Slack has a message limit on their free tier. Discord is great for voice-based communication throughout a team, so we actually use that sometimes for quick ad hoc meetings where we don't want to have the overhead of Hangouts, or just for general gaming with the team. I mean, we also just game together. There's a few people on the team that are really addicted to Dota 2. That's not really my cup of tea. Oh, I got a funny Dota story too. So back when we were making Hyperbol, when was it? Before it launched on Steam, we had our web hosting and master server hosting with our database up on one of our developers' friends' server in Utah or something. And there was another company that was also using this server. And it was the same studio that made Dota All-Stars. And so at any given time, like we could look at their website and their crap and see what they were doing, because it was all on a shared server. This is before virtual machines. So we would just remote desktop into the damn thing and we could see all their folders and stuff. I knew what they were because I had worked on Warcraft 3, but again, I was never really interested in it. But anyway, so yeah, the rest of the team, we like playing Overwatch sometimes. Me and a smaller group of the team play some of the sandbox builders like Ark. We'll probably be playing Conan later this week because that's coming out on early access. Anyways, that's the long answer to your question. Any other questions? You.
So your career has kind of taken
Oh, yeah.
some interesting paths. Did you ever sort of have an ultimate career goal? This is
I did.
what I want to do.
The funny thing about goals is that it fluctuates the longer you get lost at sea. For example, when I graduated from UCI, my goal was to start my own game studio, make amazing games using the crazy ideas I have in my head, and to make a game with my friends, which is what we were going towards. I didn't know back then what knowledge I didn't have. Now I know in hindsight that I didn't have that knowledge. But back then, I wish that I would have known that I was not business savvy. I thought that, I could just read some books and learn everything everybody else learns by getting a business degree. Not true. And I'm also kind of introverted. When I was at Blizzard, I would keep my head down at my desk and not talk to anybody. I would never socialize with a single person, which actually hurt me. Unfortunately, in this industry, it tends to be about who you know in order to advance or to network through things. It's not just about that. If you are an amazing all-star programmer, people will just know who you are and want to work with you. But not everybody's like that. I certainly wasn't. I was okay. But it definitely weakened my position whenever I would go from company to company if I had not gotten to know at least the people in my immediate area. That all changed when I became a producer at Obsidian. Because during the first week that I was there, I would communicate with people via email because I didn't like talking to people. Email is a very slow form of communication, and I quickly found that I could not do my job effectively with just email. So I would force myself to get out of my office, talk to people manually, and eventually I became less introverted. I learned that, and we're in opinion time now, so keep that in mind. I started believing that it's not just black and white between being an introvert or an extrovert. It's more of a muscle that you need to work, your social muscle. If the more you put yourself out there and force yourself in social situations, things that make you feel uncomfortable, that is a form of exercising. And eventually it becomes easier and easier. it never becomes painless. Because I do believe that there are people out there, like you, Dan, who can just go into an empty room with complete strangers there, get to know them, and have a great time. I still can't do that. And I attempt to be social, but even at parties or social situations, my social mana just plummets to zero after a certain hour. And the only thing that gets me through it is either alcohol or energy drinks or some key objective. For example, at GDC, there's a crap load of parties. And oftentimes, there will be people at those parties that you want to talk to, that you recognize, that you feel could be a good contact. And even when my social mana bar is at zero, if there is something that I need to achieve, that will give me enough energy to go out and do it. I know, I've worked with a lot of programmers, and I graduated with a lot, and it's easy to get comfortable into just being isolated within yourself, but if you think that you're going to be doing anything other than programming later, put yourself out there and just start learning how to socialize with people. That's one of the biggest things that I wish I would have learned going to school. Because when you get out there, it's actually more like high school, sadly. It gets very political, very cliquey, and there are the cool kids in the game industry somehow that love going out and doing things, and they have their own cliques and groups. You don't get picked on, there aren't bullies or anything, but there are, kind of. There are bullies in the industry too. There are, and I've worked with some of them, and it gets professionally brutal. And sometimes they come in the form of producers, and sometimes you work for them. And they work you to the bone, they give you threats, saying, well, if you don't finish this by this certain hour, you might not have a job here. And so they bully you into burning yourself out. So all those things can happen. I don't mean to give you scary stories, but I mean, there's certainly a fair share of those. If you want to work in the game industry, you need to keep all that in mind. And there's a lot of good in it as well. I mean, you're making frickin' video games. And the most rewarding feeling I've had in the industry is when I go to a launch signing. Like, the midnight signing of Fallout New Vegas was at the GameStop at the Spectrum. There was a line going out for forever. And just before that, me and the team, we went to Dave & Buster's, and Bethesda covered the cost of all we can drink drinks, which I took advantage of. And so at the signing, I was gone. But it was fun, because it was just great seeing all the fans there, and there at midnight to get an early copy of a game, which I was proud of, but when you finish a game, all you can see are the things that you didn't do, or the bugs, or the problems, all the imperfections. And so when I saw that people really enjoyed the game, it's like, really, you enjoyed it in spite of this thing? And like, oh, we didn't even notice that thing. Like, shit, I shouldn't have told you. Anyways, that's sort of the semi-long answer to your question. There are going to be long answers. I ramble a bit. Yes?
Hi, I'm from the Cal State Long Beach Game Development Club down there, where you guys have an awesome thing going here where you have like all the small teams.
You guys have a spy in your midst.
Yeah. What we do is like we swing for the fences with a giant team that will be between 60 to 120 people.
I'm sorry, for a project?
Yeah.
Okay then.
And we published 4 different games over no, 4.
It's 3 months at a time.
Oh, well, yeah, over a semester. But for every semester, we publish a game. And
now it sounds like he's bragging.
I am very proud of like what we've done so far and where we can go. But specifically to get to my question, thinking more long term with us, you've talked about very bad practices that seem to be common in the industry, and those are practices that I think many of our officers would like to avoid, so that we can create a culture that is helpful to everybody in this club. And what practices would you say the most kill people's enthusiasm in a project, and what invigorates people the most?
So the biggest thing that I've seen that hurts anybody's motivation is whenever you have them work on something they're not passionate about, which can happen. I've known people that have worked on sports games and they hate sports. They do not like their jobs. And some of them would be there for several years because they really enjoy the pay, or they really enjoy their coworkers. It varies, honestly. ultimately what it comes down to is everybody's different and what they derive their enjoyment from. If you're a people person, working with the right team is enough to motivate and keep you going. If you're not, and it's more about the game itself, then picking and choosing the project, finding projects that you're passionate about. For some people, it's the pay. They want the job security. They want health insurance, especially this year. And it's, yeah! Oh, that's, so many of my friends that are in the indie space, like that are contractors, they're getting affected by the stuff that's happening. It's worrisome. So keep writing whatever college insurance you guys get, because it's going to get scary out there. And the biggest things that I would say burn people out is overworking. I mean, it's no secret that the crunch is a thing in the industry. And crunch is avoidable. Crunch is a byproduct of poor planning. And it happens because nobody's perfect. There are oftentimes in a publisher-developer relationship, there are deadlines that need to be met that are set forth by the publisher's marketing team, and they need to hit hard dates to make a presentation for E3 or something. And so people need to put in a lot of hours. I mean, we even did that on New Vegas. There was, I think, a solid month where I was pulling 110-hour weeks, which I do not suggest to anybody. Yeah, so let me break down the math on that one for you. So in order to do a 110-hour week, I would wake up at 8 a.m., go to work, and, oh, no, 10-minute shower, very, very brief. Go to work, be at work until 2 a.m.-ish, and then go home, and then as long as I got 6 hours of sleep, I was still okay. 7 days a week, for a month. The good news is not everybody on the team had to do that. Me and a select few others took it upon ourselves to put in more time so that other people on the team didn't have to. That's my first rule for producers or anybody that is a lead or responsible for others. Lead by being in the front lines with the rest of your team. Lead by being in the trenches. Don't be the type of leader that cracks a whip in the back, because you're not leading by example. And so the first people that would be crunching on a project, for example in New Vegas, was the leadership team, the people that were on the top. And then only if crunch was absolutely necessary would the people under them also crunch. Because if it goes the other way around, I mean, that's how you truly burn people out. And that's how you lose the respect of your entire team, is if they see you coming in at 10 a.m. and leaving at 5 p.m. while they're there until like 11 p.m. at night, they're going to hate you. So I'm not saying that the reason why we did that was to avoid people hating us. Like, I did it because that's just how I'm wired as a person. But in general, I mean, burnout, overworking people, that's how you lose them. And I've seen a lot of great developers leave the industry from burnout. And that's a tragic thing. One of the examples that I use, actually, Will Wright, which has kind of been, I guess, a big inspiration for myself through the industry. He left the game industry for a long while. He announced, like, like around October, that he was like coming back to do things, which I was really excited about. But for a good 6 years after Spore shipped, it almost killed him as far as just how the industry was changing, how politics comes into play with a lot of things, and it burned him out, and he left the industry. Luckily, he came back, but there's others that have just left and not come back. And it's just a tragic thing. I don't mean to like talk like all doom and gloom about stuff. There's a lot of cool and great things in the industry. I mean, working in a large team is really fun. Working in a small team is fun. The best thing is finishing a game and seeing people appreciate it. Seeing those positive Steam reviews, if you get positive Steam reviews. What other things are there that motivate people? Yeah, I mean, everybody's different. So you just kind of need to know what people really want and then put them on a project that suits their interests.
Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
100 to 120 people on a group project?
60 to 120, like it fluctuates.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah.
How's that working out for you guys?
Well, we published 4 games and we're getting better. So it's, you don't do that with people that have never made a game at a college where there's no game development program to make the next Skyrim or to make the next great game. You do it so that everybody there can have a great time and get experience and learn from each other, and hopefully can network some professional devs along the way also.
I mean, it's intriguing. I'm not knocking it in any way.
Right.
It just seems daunting, especially from a logistics standpoint. Yeah.
We used, if we did have a game design program, the smaller teams would probably be more accessible to
We are
this.
starting some smaller teams too, more experienced people, but we do use Trello for task management, and we use a lot of Facebook chat.
Trello for 60 people?
We'll use a bunch of different boards. for
Okay.
Trello. Yeah. I mean, if you have some ideas of interesting.
Use Jira, for
Jira?
starters.
Yeah.
Trello tends to buckle under the weight of a lot of users and requires basically a layer of management or production to manage the Trello board, whereas Jira is just more streamlined for larger teams. I mean, there's a lot of tools out there to do things. I personally don't like larger teams when people are starting in the industry because it doesn't let you find yourself as easily. And that's one thing. All of you will have different interests and different team sizes that you like being in. And most people that I've worked with don't like larger teams because it's scary at first. And so it's important to kind of just figure out what you guys like doing. It's easier to set up smaller teams in a college environment because it's easier to find 3 people to make a game with than 60 people to make a game with. And so starting small gradually and then building up from there to understand how you operate, I don't know, it just seems like you'll be wasting less time that way. Plus, from the logistics alone, I mean, a 60 to 120 man team, the project I'm on won't even hit 60 people. Like, we're making a reboot for System Shock, and I think we're probably going to peak at about 45. New Vegas, when we were in production, was about 55 people. So you guys are already going further than AAA teams are, unless you're going for like Sony Santa Monica or the like larger studios. But I mean, that's not the average case.
Some of the, I mean, if you don't mind me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll let other people ask questions.
Okay, sorry. The reason why we do that is because a lot of
the
the other
other
are
slide real
working
quick.
college full time, and then they might also be working a job, so then they might not have a lot of time. So say they can only contribute 3 hours a week. Well, 3 hours a week isn't going to get a game done, so then you need 60 other people who can put in 3 hours a week, and then you have, say,
Have you ever read the book, The Mythical Man Month?
I have heard of it.
9 women cannot make a baby in 1 month. That is a common saying in the industry and any software thing. So just be careful. I mean, the more people you attach to a project, even if they cannot put in that much more time, every extra body adds another logistical hurdle. So I mean, from a personal standpoint, I would rather work in a 6-man team of people putting in 8-hour or 10-hour days than a 60-man team of people putting in 3-hour days. Just because it's easier to get ideas gelling, it's easier to get the team synergy, and it's a better sampling size of just gauging how the industry works. When there's so many people that are allocating so small amount of time, it's hard for them to get a sense of what it's actually like working with others. And programmers especially, like, you guys will have it tough because you guys are logically minded. Well, the programmers that are here. Artists have the other hemisphere of the brain that they operate in. And so there will be a lot of clashes, and learning how to communicate with artists will be a very, very important skill because your path as a programmer in the industry, there are 2 choices. You can either be a senior programmer or a lead programmer. Those are the ceilings. Well, and then beyond that, there's tech director and all sorts of stuff there. But like, those are the immediate ceilings that you're going to hit. And the biggest difference between a lead and a lead is somebody that can also manage others and communicate well. A senior is somebody that can put their head down, do their work, but does not want to have to worry about talking to other people too much, and just has their tasks they're focused on, but is not involved with any of the direction of the project. Unfortunately, a lot of studios, they will ask their seniors to become leads, even if they're not ready to do it, even if they don't want to do it, because they need somebody in that seat. And so, more often than not, in your path in the industry, as you get better at stuff, there will be a point where somebody asks you to be a lead, and you need to be prepared for it, or at least have the options to say no. Most programmers I've worked with have not had the luxury of saying no to that sort of thing, because the other option is, well, there's no lead, they can't get the project going, they're going to have to do layoffs. So you can either keep your job and do something you don't like doing, or your friends and you will get laid off because they don't have somebody to be in that seat. And it's an easy decision for people because people like having a job. But you need to start building up that skill early. I've worked with a lot of programmers that have not been prepared for it, and if you pick it up later, it's just going to be more difficult. So it's going to be a challenge. I mean, for example, my personal challenge of learning how to be less introverted was something luckily I think I kind of started just in the nick of time, like in my mid-20s, and now I know what it takes for me to be social. But if I would have started trying to do that now, I would have been lost and useless. So anyways, so let's go to other questions. Hands. You.
What are some ways that you could motivate a team? How would you?
Fire, a lot of fire, molten lava. Let's see. By the way, there's my contact info. Again, LinkedIn is great if you don't have it yet. Companies are taking it more seriously. So, what are ways to motivate a team? Get them something to believe in. There is no greater force of motivation than people believing in a cause, and find a way to champion that cause. For example, when I was running a small indie team in my dad's dining room, our great motivation was we want to start a company. We want to make games, and that drove us. Like we did not lose any momentum with that because we were all in the same race together and gunning towards the same thing, and it kept us going. On Fallout, it was tough to keep motivation because the hours would get tough, the demands would become pretty great. I mean, we made that game in 16 to 18 months. That is a very, very tight development schedule for any AAA product, but we pulled it off. Except for one dumb bug that cropped up and launched that I hated. So tangent. There was one bug on launch day where at the very start of the game, the doctor that talks to you, his head would rotate around in a very creepy way. we never knew that bug existed. And when we saw it, we're like, how? But it was like a very specific case on Xboxes, and anyways, going back to the whole motivation thing, I found that, I mean, just in all these years, motivation is a tricky thing, but it comes down to a mental thing of just finding a common goal that people can rally behind and somebody to champion it. So typically the person on the team could be the game director, project director, or the lead designer, somebody that is very passionate about what they're working on and inspires others to be passionate as well. There have been times when people have said that in a former life I would have made a great cult leader. It's possible. I mean, because when, like, you guys haven't seen that in this talk, but there are some things that I talk about, specifically actually time travel, that I get very passionate about and debate about, and when I get on a soapbox, people listen. And that is a very powerful skill. I'm not sure if I always had it or if I acquired it, but yeah, the greatest motivator is being able to inspire others. That's a short and sweet of it. And money. Yes?
So, did you ever finish Steam Bandits, and how did you guys acquire the rights to System Shock, or what happened with that?
Interesting question, sir. So Steam Bandits still isn't done. So without going into the details of it, Steam Bandits started as Steam Bandits Outpost, which was going to be the JRPG, Chrono Trigger meets steampunk stuff with asynchronous stuff, all these lofty things. Funny enough, all the server tech is actually finished because most of the programmers are amazing all-star programmers that have really contributed along the way. But with the smaller team size, we found that we just needed to ship something. So, I mean, if you Google it, there's like all the Kickstarter updates that we've been sharing with all of our backers. But basically, we've decided to split up the original game into 3 smaller games and launch. The first game is called Steam Bandit Safari, which has the features that were the most complete from the original game. And then we're going to push the rest of the features off into future titles. And so Steam Bandit Safari is basically just going to have pet collection, pet combat, and some farming. So basically, Pokemon meets Harvest Moon. And I think there's probably an audience out there for that. I mean, I guess Stardew Valley did okay. Except this game is the type of experience that you can play on your desktop device or your phone. It's cloud connected, so you just log in and you resume your progress where you leave off. And there's still going to be the asynchronous cloud play with friends. So you can like trade with friends and like do like fun pet battle things. I'm personally not into those types of games too much. I like games with a lot of violence and guns, or like old school JRPG stuff, but this is close enough to it where we can ship a thing and then see what happens next. And actually, the other thing that we're going to be looking at is an HD remaster of Hyperbol. Going back to that, where I can take a look at the old fundamental game design of it, apply what I know now, and make it a much better game in as few moves as possible. So I'm really excited to do that once I figure out how to like get a TARDIS and just fabricate time. Because I think right now at this point I'm only able to put in maybe 1 to 2 hours a week into Steam Bandit stuff, and then the rest of my time is focused on System Shock, which isn't as bad as it sounds because I still have a great team that's working on Steam Bandit stuff. And the money that I'm getting paid from the System Shock stuff, I'm reinvesting back into my indie studio to help pay those guys to keep working on stuff. My girlfriend is very understanding and has put our lives on hold, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And she's very, very patient. Anybody else would have left me by now. I would have left me by now. But I got lucky. So as for the rights to System Shock, that's a story that I believe there's some articles for it. The CEO of Night Dive, he tells the story better than I do. So this is going to be a secondhand story. He worked at SOE, Sony Online Entertainment, on PlanetSide 2 for several years as a character artist. Decided to leave SOE, or there were layoffs, I'm not sure which happened, with his wife. They went on a trip just touring South America, and he took a small crappy laptop with him that had some games on it. I think one time when he was like, I don't know, in Colombia or someplace where there's great coffee, he loaded up his laptop, was playing some System Shock 2, and thought to himself, damn, why haven't they made any more of these? And so he started investigating and hunting down where the rights actually were. And it turned out the rights were at an insurance holding company. So something that actually happened quite a bit back in the old days is the rights to things. Whenever a company would go bankrupt or would have to go under, the bank would foreclose on things. And some of those assets could be the rights to things. And so this insurance company was sitting on the rights to the project, or to System Shock and stuff. And they weren't doing much with it. The CEO of Night Dive tracked them down, had a conversation with them, first started pitching them saying, okay, so would you guys be up for like just us releasing System Shock 2 on Steam? Because you couldn't get it anywhere. Like it wasn't available digitally. And so the insurance company was like, we're not sure, but okay, we'll see how it goes. And so Night Dive releases System Shock 2 on Steam. The insurance company is super happy. Some business things happen in between there, and then Night Dive acquires the rights outright because System Shock 2 did very, very well on Steam. I think it sold like around, I don't know, what was it, 600,000 units? Most of them probably on Steam sale. So maybe like at about $5 a pop or so, but that's still a good chunk of change. So the insurance company was happy. Rights went over to Night Dive, and all that happened like I think a year or two before I even got there. So he tells the story better than I did, but that's the gist of it. More questions? Or actually, how are we doing on time? I've been talking a lot, but there's still more left in me.
It's 9:06 right now.
How long do we have the room for?
34 minutes.
I mean,
Question. This stuff is great.
What do you think about game addiction since you have worked at the World of Warcraft, right?
Who? Oh, I have, but what do I think of who?
Game addiction.
Who's that?
Game addiction.
Oh, game addiction. Sorry, I've been drinking a lot of this stuff. I mean, I think video games. I'm no brain scientist, but I've read things that say that when you play games, it releases dopamine or that other stuff that make you really like what you're doing, and some people get addicted to that, just like any other substance. I think with gaming and other things, I mean, moderation is key. Don't let it consume your life. Never lose focus of what's important to you. Unless you're a competitive pro gamer, then go nuts, because that's how you're making money. But for casual hobbyist gamers or core gamers that play games for fun and enjoyment, everybody's wired differently. So I mean, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question well enough, but I mean, game addiction, I believe, is a real thing, just like any other addiction, and some people might be chemically wired in their brain to be very vulnerable to those sorts of addiction things. It's a case-by-case basis, but I mean, when I was at Blizzard, we would hear reports of like people playing StarCraft in cyber cafes for hours and hours on end, and just like being malnourished, or some people just dropping dead. It's like, don't kill yourself over a game. It's not worth it for your KDR. Don't do that. Anyways, that's what I think about. Game addiction's bad, and avoid it if you can. More questions? Could be about anything. Like, I've been drinking enough of this stuff, which is just an energy drink. I might just spill secrets. Yes?
How do you suggest that a game developer become business savvy?
I mean, that you're asking the wrong person. I know what not to do. So I'll tell you what not to do, and then you can do the inverse. I wish that I would have taken courses on business and business management. I still can, but I shouldn't because I'm doing a bunch of other things. And now I've learned the hard way as to what I don't know and what I should rely on others to do. So for example, I know how to manage people, and I know how to manage game projects. But managing a business, completely different side of the story. On the business side of things, you need to be a people person. You need to know how to deal with slimy people, because those are a lot of the people on the business end of things. Studying up on books, on contract negotiation, contract law, understanding what it is to start a business, difference between an LLC, sole proprietorship, S corp, all that fun crap. It's a lot of information, and it's not something I personally enjoy, so I've never gone fully down that rabbit hole. But there's other people that do enjoy it. The best business people I've worked with have been people persons, where they like going out and emailing people that they've just run into. They remember everybody's names. They can work a room. They can go to a networking event, get to know everybody, know what everybody else does. They are aggressively on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn stalk everybody. But they're very, very vital to the industry. And if you're not that person, you want to become that person, study as much as you can. Learn from successes and failures of business. There's probably talks online from GDC stuff about the do's and don'ts of game business. The most I can tell you is if you're not a people person, don't do game business stuff, because it is mostly a socialization and networking field. Because the business person, the CEO of a company, a good friend of mine distilled it into some basic requirements. The CEO's job is to ensure money is coming into the company, direct the overall course of what the business is doing, and is responsible for the hiring and firing of individuals. That's it, essentially. But that's a lot. And finding somebody skilled to do that is tricky. And learning how to do that is even trickier because you need the experience to do that. You can make up for the experience by learning from the experience of others. So that's, I mean, I'd say I've learned about half of that stuff. I'm not a people person. I tried to be when I was running my indie studio, and I would be in business meetings. I'd be making pitch decks for investors and finding ways of getting money. I was not successful in it because I did not have the stomach to deal with those other types of personalities. Business people that their sole purpose is to get the best deal, take advantage of you as much as they can. It's just a slimy thing. I feel much happier if I'm just managing a game team and not having to worry about that external side of things. What type are you?
Like introvert, extrovert?
Yeah. Are you a people person?
Not really.
Would you want to become a people person?
I can exercise that muscle.
Yeah, exactly. You can give it a shot, but you'll be at a disadvantage compared to others. So I would say dip your toe in it. See how you fare in social situations, networking events. There's, I think, some business or young entrepreneur meetups that happen from the meetup.com website. Hunt those down. Just put yourself in other situations and monitor yourself and see how you do. And if you do enjoy that sort of stuff. If you don't, then find somebody that does. I wish I would have done that. Yes?
I guess sort of piggybacking off that, what are some other ways besides that whole objective base that you gave the talk about for kind of exercising that introvert extrovert muscle?
Alcohol, sadly. that was what did it for me, to be honest. I found that in order to survive in the industry, you can't be an island. You can't be isolated. You need to have the skills to talk to people and understand, in an objective capacity at least, who is a beneficial contact and who isn't. And that's essentially the core of networking. It's not exactly using people because that's how everybody else that networks is operating. They're getting to know people just enough to know what they can do for them in the future. It's almost social investing. You don't need to look at it that way. I mean, I think to some extent I've learned to look at it that way subconsciously, but that's out of necessity for survival. If you're starting out, go to events. Beer Wednesday is a great example. That happens every Wednesday at the Old Dubliner in Tustin. You could just go to Facebook and type in Beer Wednesday and you'll find all the information. They have all the events up. And going there cold, like by yourself, I would not advise it. Go with a friend. It's like going to a college party. Never ever go alone. It's just awkward. Go with somebody or a group of friends. Carve out a corner, and if you overhear conversations which sound interesting, find a way to join those conversations without being creepy. That's a very tricky thing too, because most people that are at Beer Wednesday, they also have their own little cliques that form, but some of them don't. Another great thing to do is with the IGDA, every few months we do social mixers, and the whole point of that is networking. Everybody there is there with the goal of interacting with everybody else. And so you know you will never be bothering anybody at social mixers because that's the goal of the event. I think the last one we did was in Newport Beach at Muldoon's. We're going to try to do another one before GDC. But yeah, I mean, putting yourself out there, getting conversations, and there's a trick. And I just remember this trick, so you guys might want to write this down. If you're talking to somebody else, find something that they can talk about that they are very interested in. Because it is very difficult to get somebody to shut up if it's something they're passionate about. And there's a rapport connection that happens. Same on the other side. If you're talking to somebody, try to talk about something that you're passionate about, that you're interested in. And you'll find that the words just come out. Like if you're, I don't know, really into Doctor Who, and you just know everything about it, and you're talking to people that are also into that stuff, start talking about it too. People can pick up on if you're being genuine or just faking it. And you're always genuine about something you're passionate about. So rely on that in social situations and you should be okay. Yes?
How do you tackle trade-offs in both like a designer and producer perspective?
Designer what perspective?
Producer.
What do you mean by trade-offs?
Like how would you choose between adding this gameplay element between this, and you can't really coexist together, so you got
triage.
Trade-offs.
Well, triage is what it's called, actually. So there is something that happens in the industry called feature creep. Feature creep can be defined as somebody having a really cool idea that sounds great for the game, and it's going to extend the schedule out. That's a feature creeping in. Some games, that could spell death for a game if the schedule goes on too long. The way to assess it is to look at its cost versus benefit. How long will this thing take to make? What are the risks as well of implementing this feature? And how much time or budget is in the schedule to do this thing? Is it worth it? And there is not really a magic formula to determine if a feature is worth it or not. It's very subjective. Oftentimes it comes down to the right type of lead designer or game director or project director that can determine if adding that feature will make the game significantly better and warrant the cost of development. It's hard to say. There's also another term that's used often in the industry called MVP, the minimum viable product. That's basically the bare minimum of feature sets you can have in a game while it's still being a game that is a viable product. Like, try to strip a game down to the minimum amount of features until you are still happy with it, and that is the game that you should ship. If you go beyond that, it might not be that much worth it for you. It might be something you can hold back into a sequel or a DLC. But the minute you go beyond being a minimum viable product is when you also get into feature creep territory. if I had time and a whiteboard, I'd like just like do these cool charts and graphs and stuff. But I mean, you can kind of visualize it, like get to that minimum viable product, and then if there's any additional features, they're not too important. Because if they were important, they would already be in that minimum viable product. The danger becomes when you start redefining what the minimum viable product is, and that just comes down to the leadership structure of the team and just how objective they can be with themselves and the features that they're thinking about. So the short answer is, it's tricky. Next question. Yes?
What's the best piece of advice that you would give for someone that has no industry experience and is trying to get hired?
Ooh, are you asking for yourself or asking for a friend?
Asking for myself. Who is
What-
my friend?
Okay. What would you say your skills are?
Programming, design, working hard.
Have you done any side projects that have demonstrated your abilities?
I would say so, but it's not, I don't have ship titles, I don't have industry experience that I can list.
You don't need something shipped in order for something to be important. So another thing I do for the IGDA, we do resume workshops sometimes, so I talk to a lot of students. And the biggest piece of advice that I give is work on side projects as much as you can. What you work for a school project doesn't matter, because that's something you have to do. What people look for is what you've done beyond what you have to do. If you've demonstrated that passion, that drive to continue studying the game industry trade itself. And so if you haven't already, even if you haven't shipped a project, working with other teams and getting even something to a demo state is better than nothing. Because when applying for a job, I mean, the good news is the industry will always need programmers and it's a high demand job, so you shouldn't have too much difficulty. But for other disciplines, like artists especially, they have a really hard time in the industry. Whenever you apply for a job, you're competing against everybody else that is your peer. And so, and this is going to be some competitive advice, so beware. But everybody in the room here that does not have a job in the industry, that eventually wants a job in the industry, will be a competitor of yours. And so the goal is to look like a better deal. So what I look for in a resume or in somebody's LinkedIn page, what have you done in the past? What have you done beyond school? I don't really care about your GPA because experience matters more than how good you are at being a student. I never did homework. I thought it was a waste of time. But I did great on the tests, but still, they grade you for homework sometimes. That's silly. So if you haven't already, find a team that you can work with or something to demonstrate your abilities to pick up that experience. Internships are another great opportunity. I know Blizzard has like a summer internship program for programmers. Try to latch onto those. Participate in extracurricular stuff. Network with people. Go to like some of the IGD events that we do and absorb as much knowledge as you can. You never know who you might meet or develop a rapport with that you might work with in the future on a project. I would say the greatest successes I have found in the industry have been when I have simply just went out of my comfort zone and gone to an event that I was on the fence about going to. Because it's only when you get out of your comfort zone do you actually start building upon yourself. That's why it's your comfort zone. You're comfortable with it, so you're not going to be building yourself if you're comfortable. Anyways, hopefully that answers your question. It's not going to be easy, but once you get your foot in the door, you work your way up.
Yes.
And like I said, there's always QA.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So folks, we are going to have enough time for 2 questions, and then we have to go.
That's also what a producer does. They rain on the parade. Okay. Oh, I can pick on him because he's also in the IGDA. And yes, he is great though. Okay, so we have time for 2 more questions. What?
Yeah, 2 more questions. So
Okay.
Go. Okay, bye.
Okay, you've asked a lot of questions, so I'm just seeing if anybody else's hand wants to raise first, just in case. And I'll still be available outside of here. Yes?
What's some advice you would tell your 20-year-old self?
Oh God. Take the job at Google. I have a few friends that work at Google now that graduated from UCI, and they make about 3 times more than me. And they're like well on their fast track of their life. But they still work on side projects with me for games, so I don't know who has it better. We'll see. What advice would I give my 20-year-old self? Switch shampoos, because I think that was one of the causes of me losing hair. What else? Oh, don't date a certain person that I dated, because that derailed things a lot. I don't think I'd really change that much. I mean, like I said, sometimes I look back and I wonder if I really should have left Blizzard. Because back when I was there, it was a 200-person company. It was when they had the building off in theory, before they had their big campus. I still talk to a lot of the guys that I worked with that very closely from back in the day, and they're super senior. One of the guys is the game director on Hearthstone, Ben Broden. He's a cool, fun guy with a very deep voice. But I guess maybe a poet or a writer said something like, would you rather have, no, I'm gonna get the quote wrong, but basically, I'd much rather have interesting things happen to me than safe things, because it's interesting things that give you fodder for talks, that lets you share wisdom with others, and I really enjoy this. And I've never thought about like being a teacher or an instructor for anything, because that sounds like a lot of work, and again, lazy. But this is my comfort zone, and don't throw the "oh, get out of your comfort zone, Jason" thing back at me, because I also don't have time to do more than this. But yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give myself is don't doubt yourself. Always be confident in what you know you can do, and +1. Like don't be cocky, but don't doubt, because your brain is thinking a certain way and your gut is going in a certain direction, and as long as you're true to yourself, you will always be on the path that you should be on. If you deviate from that, you're not gonna be happy. And I would say right now with my career, I'm pretty happy. I mean, I've done a lot. I've dabbled in a lot of disciplines. I'm now in charge of an amazing project that I played when I was younger. That was what it's based on. I'm working with amazing people. I mean, there's still areas in which I personally would like to improve, but that's what keeps life fun. I mean, if I was finished and I was completely happy with myself and had nothing else that I wanted to build towards, that's like hitting end game content in an MMO. That's when you start getting bored. Whereas life that is challenging, that has problems for you to solve constantly, that's interesting. That keeps you going. That's great game design. And so, yeah, I mean, other than telling myself not to date certain people and switch shampoos, I think I'd be good.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. One more question. Yes.
Kind of going off what you just said, what do you do to stop yourself from burning out?
I'll let you know when I figure it out. So I feel like I have burned out a few times in the industry. Certainly in my 4 years lost at sea doing the Steam Bandit stuff, sometimes I would feel creatively bankrupt. Working from home, like doing remote stuff, it is very, very easy to kind of get in a downward spiral of depression. And I don't really talk about this because I don't want people to feel sorry for me, but before I landed the System Shock gig and I was just doing consulting stuff and going through the roller coaster of finding people and losing people over and over on a project, I would have a panic attack maybe once a month. I would be very depressed. I have not always been this weight. I'm slowly starting to lose weight, but I put on a lot of weight. And I definitely feel as though I was burnt out, but I didn't give up. And that's another big piece of advice. So on top of like having confidence in yourself, don't give up on yourself. Everybody here has a certain fire that drives you. And sometimes that fire gets dim, but no matter how dim it gets, it's still there. And you can always fan that fire. You just need to find a way to pull yourself out of it. Or find people to surround yourself with that can help you pull yourself out of it. Never be afraid to ask for help. I mean, again, everybody's wired differently, and you don't have to go it alone. Like I was saying earlier, I mean, if it wasn't for my girlfriend being so supportive, I might have actually burned out and left the industry. I don't know. I feel like I got really close to that point, but either I'm too stubborn to give up or too stupid to give up, but I just can't give up on things. I'm not going to do a Rick Astley quote. It's not happening. But I will do a Galaxy Quest quote. Never give up and never surrender. Words to live by. Trying to think if there's any other wisdom nuggets I can impart from that. No, that's basically it. Well, other than another way to avoid burnout is if you feel like you're getting close to burnout, that might be a warning sign that you should find different work or do something different. There are people that I've worked with in the industry that have burnt out. And one of the biggest reasons why they burnt out is because they didn't stop. They didn't monitor themselves and see how it was affecting them. They were too deep in it. They felt too much pressure of what everybody was expecting on them. Like there were some people that I worked with at other studios, I'm not going to name them now, that would be in the office until 11 p.m. every day and also work on weekends. They didn't have to. They just got so used to it, they didn't know how to turn it off. Because once you work a certain number of hours per day, that's all you really know. And they just go native. Until they just are so drained, they're sleep deprived, they just can't function that well anymore, and then they just leave the industry because they're broken. And whenever I would see that happen to somebody, I would pull them aside, lock their door on them, and force them to go home, which they didn't really appreciate, but it's for their own good. But sometimes some people get down that dark spiral. So monitor yourself, know what your limits are, never be afraid to ask for help. Don't give up on yourself. Never give up. Never surrender. All that fun jazz. And with that, Matt is looking at me with eyes of sorry, it's time to go. I will be available to answer questions. Matt, where can I hang out and not get people upset at me?
Yeah, you can go downstairs.
I can go downstairs. If you have more questions. And the rest of the talk is going to be amazing. You guys will learn a lot. But remember, just keep an eye out for the opinions.